Shintaro is an unfortunate-looking gooner who ran through more tissue boxes than you do watching Annie and her at night. However, everything changes when he finds a hot angel spread out on his balcony who makes him see heaven for the first time. It all began when Shintaro was on his way back from a long shift and spotted a cat. He immediately stopped to rub it as that was the only chance he'd ever get to rub a kitty. Afterward, he entered his apartment, which had a suspicious number of tissue boxes ready for a cold night. That night, as he slept, he received a surprise package on his balcony. The next morning, Shintaro woke up and poured himself some milk. He suddenly noticed the window open, and when he went to investigate, he found a girl on the balcony, causing him to spill his cream all over her. Tawa greeted him innocently, but Shintaro was disgusted with how much of his milk he had gotten on her, so he waited outside the bathroom while she cleaned up. There, Shintaro struggled to find an explanation for why a hot girl was currently stripping in his bathroom and wondered if he was being pranked. Tawa then asked Shintaro for some clothes, so he began searching for a clean t-shirt, since most of them were used when his tissues ran out. Once she gets barely dressed, she apologizes for using his balcony without permission. She then asks to meet the rest of his family, but Shintaro explains that he lost them at a milk store years ago. Tawa is surprised that Shintaro lives in such a huge mansion till Shintaro explains what an apartment building is. Tawa wonders how humans can live in shoeboxes, but she commends him on having a compact home. Shintaro then asks why she was sleeping on his balcony, causing Tawa to thank him for his hospitality. When she asks what she can do to repay him, Shintaro spots her cleavage as the answer, but the virgin in him can't bring himself to ask. Disappointed, Tawa makes up her mind to cook for him instead, but when she opens the fridge, all she finds is more disappointment. She then offers to clean up instead, but she accidentally bumps into Shintaro's secret jizz Bible. Thankfully, she gets distracted when she tries separating two cats fighting on the balcony. Afterward, Shintaro helps bandage her battle scars and informs her there's a delicate way to handle kitties with your fingers. Tawa is impressed by how pure his aura is, but Shintaro advises her to run home, stating how dangerous it is for a girl to be around a virgin. When he asks where she lives, Tawa says her home is in heaven, so he figures it's the name of a street or something. But when she insists she's an angel, Shintaro worries that he's dealing with a rare kind of lunatic. He then decides he has to get rid of her before she starts selling him snake oil. Tawa says she has nowhere to go since it's her first time on Earth, so she asks Shintaro if she can stay with him. However, Tawa ignores her request and insists he needs to head to work. He hands over her dry clothes and tells her to go back to whatever asylum she broke out of. At this, Tawa thanks him for his kindness, making him wonder if he's doing the right thing. Later, Shintaro leaves work early thanks to a stomach malfunction. However, on his way home, all he can think about is if Tawa is okay. Suddenly, Tawa passes by with an older man and happens to notice him. Shintaro is glad her dad finally came to get her, but Tawa reveals it's just a random man that invited her to a hotel since she had nowhere to go. Shintaro quickly grabs the dumbass and runs from the pregnant man, but before they can make it very far, Shintaro collapses. Later, he wakes up in his apartment, so Tawa asks him how he's doing. When Shintaro says he's fine, Tawa begins to cry out of happiness and asks if he'd like some porridge. Moments later, she whips up something and feeds it to Shintaro. As Shintaro eats, he realizes he hasn't had anyone cook for him in a long time and misses the feeling. After, he tells Tawa she shouldn't be following random people around cause they could be dangerous. When Tawa looks sad, Shintaro suggests she live with him since she has nowhere else to go. Tawa hugs Shintaro from excitement, so Shintaro figures she's probably the good kind of lunatic. Shintaro asks how she managed to carry him home, so Tawa says she just flew him there and reveals her wings in the process. The next morning, Shintaro wakes up thinking that was the weirdest wet dream till he suddenly finds Tawa beside him with her wings spread. When her t-shirt begins to divinely slip off, he looks away and suggests going out for breakfast. Later at the store, Tawa gets excited by one of the items on sale, so Shintaro hides her before she exposes her wings. When they return home, Tawa apologizes for getting too excited, so Shintaro asks what it is that angels even do. Tawa explains that they convey God's will to humans and bring them happiness. Shintaro asks what that involves, but Tawa is as clueless as he is, which is why she was sent to Earth to learn about humans. She then takes a bite of the bread and asks if she can have it every day, but Shintaro realizes he's too broke to buy food every day at the convenience store. At this, he suggests going shopping for ingredients and daily supplies. Tawa gets excited and spreads her wings again, and then she touches Shintaro to see if his fever has gone away. However, Shintaro quickly pulls away before he spills some of his milk again. Later, they arrive at the mall and Tawa runs off in excitement. They head to a section for bath towels, and Shintaro struggles to keep his dirty mind from wandering too far. They continue to look for supplies and Tawa spots a cute mug that reminds her of the cat wars from the other day. However, she remembers Shintaro is church rat poor and selflessly places it back on the shelf. Suddenly, Tawa starts attracting attention because of her fancy dress, so Shintaro suggests getting her normal clothes. At the store, Tawa worries that she's making Shintaro spend too much money, but Shintaro says he can afford to get some casual clothes and pajamas. When he tells her to pick whatever she wants, a lady walks up and offers to help. Tawa excitedly checks out their spring collection, and when she leaves to change, the store attendant commends Shintaro on bagging a hot girlfriend.
He can't keep getting away with it!
Meanwhile, as Tawa changes, she begins to wonder what she can do to repay Shintaro for his kindness. When she remembers her mission on Earth, she walks over to Shintaro and vows to bring happiness into his life, but everyone in the store thinks she proposed. When they're done, Tawa asks Shintaro how she looks in her new outfit. Tawa then realizes how drop-dead gorgeous she looks and suggests they get something to drink because he suddenly got thirsty. When they return home, Tawa tells Shintaro how much fun she had because she was with him, so Shintaro wonders if she has more riz than him. Suddenly, Tawa notices the mug from the store, so she gets happy and thanks Shintaro, proving he's got game too. However, that night he realizes he needs to get a separate bed.
It's about damn time.
Afterward, Tawa flashes back to when she arrived on Earth and was thrilled to see so many tall buildings and fast-moving trains. She had read about the Earth and how to make human friends as an angel, but soon realized textbooks don't prepare you for real life. While looking for human friends, she got tired and felt sleepy. After an endless search for where to stay, she decided to crash on Shintaro's balcony because hotels are not a thing in heaven. After her narration, Shintaro says he was glad she chose his balcony. Tawa serves the food and asks if Shintaro would like to be fed. Shintaro thanks her but refuses the offer. He then takes a bite, which makes him realize he's been living a flavorless lie. This made him compliment Tawa's cooking while she says she learned from the book. After sampling multiple dishes, Shintaro recalls her vow to make him happy, so he ticks his checkboxes and figures Tawa is a full package. Shintaro asks why life is suddenly being good to him, and Tawa says it's her only way of thanking him since his little man doesn't work. After the dinner, Shintaro shows Tawa how to use the bathtub, and she thanks him. Shortly after, while Tawa takes her bath, Shintaro stands at the door with his imagination running wild. To keep his sanity, he decides to watch TV, but Tawa's banging body is stuck in his head. Shintaro feels helpless and wonders if he'll survive being that close to a lady. Just then, it occurred to him that he had to study. After flipping pages for a while, Shintaro decides to take a leak. On opening the bathroom door, he gets a glimpse of heaven and suddenly freaks out, apologizing for barging in. Tawa offers to shut the curtain while he pees, but Shintaro would rather die than risk his mini magnum being seen. Later, while Shintaro takes his bath, Tawa decides to pay him back by showing up to ask if he needs a back rub. Later that night, Tawa slept soundly. However, Shintaro battled blue balls all night long. The next morning, Shintaro wakes with panda eyes and decides to take a leak. Forgetting he no longer lives alone, he walks in on Tawa dressing again while they both freaked out. Shortly after, while Shintaro brushed, he thought it was time to set some ground rules. However, before he could finish planning, Tawa barged in to brush and got a peek at his little man. Afterward, Tawa prepared a mini feast and they ate together. When they finished, Shintaro thanked her for the food and prepared to leave for school. Just then, Tawa realizes he is a student and hurriedly cleans up hoping to go with him. However, Shintaro tells her she'd be better off at home. She then asks him to stay home with her, but he says not even a sloppy toppy could make him stay. After this, Shintaro leaves her some money and tells her to have fun till he gets back in the evening. On his way to school, while Shintaro struggled to keep his eyes open, Shuichi, his dumbass friend, suddenly gives him a rude awakening. Facing Shuichi, Shintaro asks if he has a death wish. While they bickered, Satsumi joined them and scolded Shuichi for his poor manners. After this, she tells Shintaro he looks like shit, so Shuichi also takes a closer look at Tawa. Worried, Shuichi asks Shintaro if he is possessed, and Shintaro wonders if angels could possess people. On their way, while Shintaro explains that he didn't get enough sleep because he's been busy all through the weekend, Satsumi suggests that he takes the day off, but he says he'll be fine. She then asks if he'll be okay since he lives alone, but Shuichi interjects, asking her to move in with him if she is really concerned. However, Satsumi says friends are meant to look after each other. Hearing this, Shuichi asks that she does the same for him since he's got more game than Shintaro. Shintaro then teases them saying they're like a comedic couple. In response, Satsumi says she'd rather enroll at a convent than be stuck with a loser like Shuichi. Back at Shintaro's apartment, Tawa gets busy playing full-time housewife. After she finishes cleaning, she cools off, wishing Shintaro could appear and take her to Ecstasy Island. It then occurred to her that Shintaro had nothing to eat for lunch. Back at the school, during lunchtime, Satsumi asks why Shintaro is taking vegetable juice, and he explains he's had too much for breakfast. Satsumi then tells him she's worried he'll die of malnutrition. However, he assures her there are other things that could kill a man faster. Shuichi tries to chip in his 2 cents, but gets shut down by Satsumi. While Shintaro laughs at Shuichi, he almost lets it slip that he's got a new cook. However, he tells his friends that he eats at work sometimes. After this, Satsumi offers to make lunch for him, saying she's got more than enough to spare. Hearing this, Shuichi asks if he could get some too, but Satsumi says he can tell that to his mom. While this was going on, Shintaro looked out the window and spotted Tawa with a lunchbox. He suddenly covers the window to prevent his friends from seeing her. While his friends wonder if he is going nuts, Shintaro subtly asks Tawa to meet him on the roof and dashes off. Shuichi then says he's probably gone to meet a girl and gets his head banged up by Satsumi. Meanwhile, a group of boys saw Tawa flying to the roof and thought school stress was driving them crazy. On getting to the roof, Shintaro worries about Tawa showing up all over the news if people see her flying. Regretting her actions, Tawa apologized, saying she came because she was worried he'd be hungry. After this, she dropped the lunchbox and turned to leave. However, Shintaro apologizes for being a jerk and tells her to stay and eat with him. While they ate, Shintaro complimented her cooking and asked why she made the same dish from the previous day. Tawa responds and says she made it because she wants to see him happy. While this was going on, Satsumi wonders where Shintaro went and flashes back to when she got lost and was found by Shintaro, who then took her home. She'd been crushing on him since then and had forgotten his name until she met him again 9 years later in school. Satsumi suddenly looks out the window and spots Shintaro sneaking around with Tawa and figures Shuichi was right after all. Meanwhile, Shintaro tells Tawa to head home, and she responds by telling him to come home soon. After this, Tawa spread her wings and flew away, shocking Satsumi. Later, when Shintaro gets home, Tawa welcomes him, and in turn, he thanks her for bringing him lunch. Tawa then apologizes for causing him trouble earlier in the day. Shintaro says she doesn't have to and notices his clothes are neatly folded. So he asked Tawa how she learned to use the washing machine. Tawa then said she learned from the book she told him about. Suddenly, Shintaro notices his underwear among the folded clothes and almost dies from the embarrassment since he hid them away. To reduce the awkwardness, he thanks her for washing them and spots a bear sewn into his underwear. Tawa explains she did that to cover up the holes in his underwear, adding insult to his injury. After trying to keep things cool, Shintaro eventually tells Tawa to stay away from his underwear. However, Tawa misunderstood him and asked if he wanted a bunny instead of a bear. Shintaro laughed, wondering if anyone could be more naive. Meanwhile, Satsumi couldn't stop thinking about what she saw and questioned her sanity since normal people don't fly. She then blames her delusion on the shock of seeing her crush with someone prettier. Just then, she realizes Cupid must have done a number on her and decides to tell Shintaro that her lunch offer still stands. Back at Shintaro's apartment, Shintaro refuses to take lunch to school because he doesn't know what to tell his friends. Tawa then asks if he hates her since he also slept on the floor the night before. Shintaro tells her his flagpole won't let him sleep, but she wasn't having any of it. To prevent further drama, Shintaro takes the food instead. After this, Tawa tells him she'll have dinner ready before he returns, but Shintaro says he will be going to work after school. Hearing this, Tawa offers to go with him, but Shintaro says the housewife role suits her best, and he's the happiest man on earth because of that. After this, Tawa leaves and hurries to school while feeling guilty for dumping her like that. During lunch break in school, Shintaro sneaks around to avoid being seen by his friends. However, his ass gets busted by Shuichi, who asks him to join them. When they sat together, Satsumi decided to pop the question again, but noticed Shintaro came with a packed lunch this time. Shuichi notices this too and says he never thought he'd see the day. In his defense, Shintaro says he got it as a gift from an old woman he helped on his way to school, leaving his friends awestruck. Shintaro then opens the food and finds a love message addressed to him. He suddenly gobbles up the food to prevent his friends from finding out. However, Satsumi sensed something was fishy since his mom wasn't around to make such food. After this, Shuichi made himself comfortable around Satsumi's food while she burned with anger. After school, Shintaro heads home thinking about how life could be good and messed up at the same time. While thinking of how to keep Tawa's true identity hidden, he loses what was left of his troubled mind in public. Suddenly, he gets approached by a shrink who warns him he's about to be hit by a torrent of girl trouble. Surprised, Shintaro then asks if any man was ever free from girl trouble. The shrink then offers to sell him some talisman to ward off the looming trouble, but Shintaro Shintaro flees before the shrink finishes his advert. On his way, Shintaro thought the shrink was right about his girl troubles. However, he told himself that angels don't cause trouble. On getting to work, Shintaro's boss asked if he was feeling better, and he apologized for having to leave work. After this, his boss tells him to play nice since he'll be working with a newly hired girl. Wondering what she's like, he opens the dressing room and gets a glimpse of Isumi's forbidden fruit. Isumi suddenly covers up and gives him a loud reminder to knock next time. Shortly after, while Shintaro did the dishes, Isumi's palm prints on his face drew attention, but all he could think of was girl trouble. To his surprise, Isumi showed up with an ice pack for his face, so he took it and apologized. Isumi tells him it's fine and blames herself for leaving the door unlocked. After this, they introduce themselves and Shintaro tries to lighten her mood with a joke about her name, but she shuts him down and leaves. However, Shintaro was glad he wouldn't be losing his job because of her. Afterward, Shintaro couldn't help seeing through Isumi's outfit, so he tried to crack open his skull to let it out. However, this brings back all his problems. After this, his boss announces that he and Isumi could leave for the day. As a reward for their work, he tells them to have some parfait from the fridge. When Isumi brought the cherry parfait, it reminded Shintaro of her lady wares, and he struggled to keep a straight face. However, he turned to Isumi and found her redder than tomato sauce. Shintaro asks if they are cool, saying he emptied his brains earlier. This infuriates Isumi and a mini blizzard starts in the room. Shintaro wondered if it was the apocalypse but got carried away when he noticed Isumi shivering. He then asked if she was okay, and she suddenly said she was a Yuki Onna. Meanwhile, the customers were freezing and asked the attendant if the temperature could be raised. In the back room, Shintaro is stunned by Isumi's confession. However, he thinks if angels exist, other weird creatures must exist too. Isumi realized how crazy she sounded and said it was a joke. However, Shintaro says she can cut the crap since he's familiar with the supernatural. After this, he tells her they need to get out before she turns everyone into human popsicles. Isumi grabbed the parfaits and they fled the scene, so the temperature at the shop stabilized. Meanwhile, in Shintaro's apartment, Towa gets busy fighting invisible demons. After the final round of her game, she figured Shintaro was running late. At the same time, Satsumi is studying at home and suddenly decides to get some ice cream at the store. At the park, when Shintaro and Isumi finish their parfaits, Isumi asks how he believes her, and he says his brain barely works around pretty girls. She asks him to keep her secret and explains that it's a family thing. After this, she says she tends to freeze things up whenever she gets upset, and because of that, she has no friends. While this was going on, Isumi got worked up again and began to freeze things up while Shintaro tried to calm her down. Afterwards, she cries and says it's the first time someone could get through to her. She then asks if they could be friends, and Shintaro agrees. While they talk, Shintaro spots a feather dropping and figures Tawa is nearby. He then looked up and saw Tawa flying. While Isumi wondered if she was dreaming, Satsumi joined them and saw Tawa flying too. After this, the girls stare at Tawa in amazement, while Shintaro wonders if things could get any worse. Suddenly, each of the girls had a lot to say to Shintaro as he stood listening cluelessly. Eventually, he shut them up and asked why Satsumi was at the park at that time. In response, she says she was just taking a walk, and just then she realized she wasn't looking good enough for her crush. After this, Shintaro suggests that they all go home and pretend nothing happened. However, Satsumi says he must be kidding. While Shintaro thought about how to get himself out of the deep shit situation, Isumi suddenly fawns all over Tawa and says angels are her favorite characters in animes and mangas. Feeling skeptical, Satsumi asked Tawa if she was really an angel, and Tawa said she came from heaven to learn about humans. Shortly after, Shintaro narrates how he got to meet Tawa and said he kept it a secret to prevent some fuss. Satsumi then tells him no one would believe the story if they didn't see her flying. However, she was bothered that a prettier girl lives with her crush. In his defense, Shintaro says he took her in only because she had nowhere else to go. Despite being a jealous freak, Satsumi's love for Shintaro increases because of this. Afterwards, she asked if Tawa made his lunch, and Shintaro confirmed her fears. Facing Isumi, Satsumi asked what she was doing with a guy this late. Surprised, Shintaro asks how she knew Isumi, so Satsumi says Isumi is popular in school for being a cold bitch. Hearing this, Isumi began to vibrate and the temperature began to drop. Sensing the looming disaster, Shintaro explains that they work together, making Satsumi consider getting a job at the shop too. Afterward, Isumi asks Shintaro if Satsumi and Towa are friends. In response, Shintaro says they are friends. Meanwhile, Satsumi wondered how Shintaro and Isumi got so close. After this, Tawa apologizes for ruining Shintaro's evening. In response, he tells her it's okay and apologizes for staying out late too. While watching them play Couple of the Year, Satsumi burned with jealousy. While this is going on, Isumi suddenly announces that she is a Yuki Onna, leaving her audience surprised. To convince them, Isumi began to blizzard things up again, and the wind blew up her skirt. When Shintaro tells her to calm down, she says she's only recalling how she felt when he peeped at her while changing. Satsumi and Tawa stared shocked while Shintaro tried to calm his lunatic friend down. Shortly after, she calms down and says she only spilled her secret because Tawa revealed hers too. Facing the other girls, Isumi says she trusts them because they are Shintaro's friends. Not wanting to be left out, Satsumi steps forward and says she wet the bed till 5th grade while her friends stared in disbelief. Shintaro then says she didn't need to say that. After this, Ayumi asks Tawa if her wings could get any bigger and Tawa spreads her wings for them to see. Later, at Shintaro's apartment, Shintaro collapses to the floor and says he's too tired. While Tawa prepared dinner, she asked if Shintaro was pissed at her. Surprised, Shintaro asked what she meant and Tawa says her reckless flying caused him trouble. Shintaro then tells her to keep her wings out of sight to avoid more trouble. After this, Tawa points out that Isumi and Satsumi were drawn to Shintaro because they're nice like him. The next day, Shintaro had a nightmare where some government officials arrested him for keeping supernatural creatures. He suddenly wakes and finds Tawa staring at him. Later at school, he bumps into Satsumi and asks why she's got heavy eye bags like him. Satsumi says nothing was wrong, but worries about the other girls stealing Shintaro's heart since they were prettier than her. While they walked, Satsumi asked Shintaro if he was dating either Tawa or Isumi. Hearing this, Shintaro freaks out and says he's only just met them. Shuichi then joins them asking who Tawa was. Immediately, Satsumi says she's Shintaro's distant cousin who just moved in with him and makes his food. Like the gluttonous fool he was, Shuichi asks if she could make some for him too. Satsumi responds saying it's never going to happen, so Shuichi leaves while Shintaro thanks Satsumi for having his back. Later that day, Shintaro saw some guys ask Isumi out and got ignored. However, when she saw Shintaro, she lit up and went to meet him. While Shintaro wondered what was up, she said she'd been waiting for him since that's what friends do. Afterward, Isumi suggests a list of Googled activities for new friends. However, Shintaro reminds her they've got a job to get to. He then suggests that they walk to work together, but Isumi insists it has to be special because it's her first time leaving school with a guy, so they decided to walk home together some other time when they were free. Meanwhile, at Shintaro's home, she wonders where Shintaro works and asks a cat for help out of desperation. At the store where Shintaro worked, his boss asked if he was dating Isumi. Surprised by his question, Shintaro says they're merely schoolmates. His boss then asks why Isumi requested to be on the same shifts with him. In response, Shintaro says they're just friends. While this was going on, a fellow worker joined them and said she tried to be friends with Isumi but got shot down. Later, Shintaro goes to take the customer's orders and finds Tawa and Satsumi sitting together. He then asks how they both found the shop and Tawa explains she told a cat to bring her, but got lost midway. However, Satsumi showed up just in time. After this, Satsumi claims she just wanted a parfait.
Stop the cap!
Afterward, he took their orders and went away. A customer called for an attendant and Tawa stood up to attend to them. Satsumi then tells her to chill out and let the attendants do their job. Shortly after, Isumi spots Tawa and Satsumi and informs Shintaro that he's got guests. This got her boss's attention, so he called her and asked her to go easy on the happy pills. Hearing this, Isumi approaches Satsumi and says they can't be friends at work. After Shintaro says he gets it, Isumi leaves before he can say anything else. Meanwhile, Satsumi decided to go through the menu with Tawa and asked if she would like to order some food. Tawa then says she's prepared dinner already, making Satsumi realize she's not a wife material. Afterward, Isumi felt pressed and went off to ease herself. Shortly after, Shintaro arrives and finds Tawa tending to the customers. He suddenly grabs her for a private chat where he tells her to stay home if she wants to help. She then asks if he was working his ass off because of her. In response, Shintaro says he just needed the experience. Tawa begins to feel like a freeloader and Shintaro manages to riz her up with sweet words. Meanwhile, his boss, who had been peeking while they talked, gets approached by Isumi. She then requested that her shifts be fixed whenever Shintaro wasn't working. Later that day, while Shintaro and Tawa prepared dinner, Tawa announced that the food was ready. At this, Shintaro tells Tawa that the cooker should be left in the kitchen. However, Tawa said it would free up space to keep it close to where they ate. Curious, Shintaro asks what angels ate for food in heaven, and Tawa responds saying hot food grows on trees in heaven. At Satsumi's house, she tries to figure out who's got a better chance with Shintaro. She then remembers Shintaro asking her for advice on things to buy for Tawa. Satsumi had played the love doctor even though she was jealous. After this, she flashes back to when Shintaro revealed that his parents live outside the country, but he chose to stay back and live alone because of the bachelor life appeal. While she worried about Shintaro, she also worried if she stood a chance of competing against an angel and a snow woman. Shortly after, Satsumi feels bothered about her crush telling her about some other girl. She thought things might have been different if she had made her moves earlier. Feeling depressed, Satsumi wished she could grow horns and fangs to improve her odds with Shintaro. Satsumi's mom noticed her brooding and asked if she was having boy problems. In response, Satsumi asked if she had any supernatural ancestors, but her mother's response didn't make her feel any better. While she thinks of ways to make Shintaro fall for her, her mom suddenly calls her and hands her a ticket she won from a draw. While her brother screamed about being the neglected child, her mom then asked Satsumi to go out with her friends, but all she could think of was her and Shintaro having fun. She thanked her mom, ignoring her yapping brother. The next day at school, while Shiichi bragged about his lame achievement, Satsumi thought of inviting Shintaro alone and rehearsed her speech in advance. However, since she couldn't get rid of Shiichi, she decided to let him tag along but still couldn't get the words out. At this point, she realized what a sore loser she was. When the school closed, Satsumi held the ticket wishing it could speak for her. Fortunately, Shiichi grabs the ticket and reads out its contents. After confirming that Shintaro wasn't working that day, he suggested that they go together. While Shuichi celebrated in advance, a fellow club member came to remind him they had some work to do after school. Disappointed, Shuichi gave a farewell speech and told his friends to have fun in his absence. In response, Satsumi thanked him for making himself useful for the first time since she met him. On their way, Shintaro decided to take a detour to the library. When they arrived, Satsumi anticipated a library lip lock, but to her dismay, Shintaro said he stayed up all night researching mythical creatures and needed books on them. Disappointed, Satsumi asks if mythical creatures are his spec now, but Shintaro says he's just a curious learner. After this, she fakes a smile and suggests some books to feel less awkward. Shintaro then complimented her for being helpful while referring to her confession at the park. Embarrassed, Satsumi tells him to forget she ever said that. After they read the books for a while, Shintaro says he's too tired while Satsumi pretends she was having fun. After this, she finds out something new about a mythical creature and decides to ask Shintaro about it. However, Shintaro was already in dreamland. Satsumi then decided to let him rest since he was up all night. After this, she went through a crush-induced déjà vu and confessed her feelings to the sleeping guy. After an hour, they prepared to leave, but it started raining. Shintaro apologizes for ruining Satsumi's romantic hopes, but she brushes it off, lying that she enjoyed the nap too. Afterward, Shintaro suggests that she take out the donut for dinner, but Satsumi suddenly enters the rain, insisting they must have the donuts together. On their way, a kid hurriedly passes by them and suddenly stumbles, so Satsumi rushes over to help. The kid then reveals that his umbrella was damaged and he needed to get to cram school as soon as possible. Satsumi happily gave her umbrella to the kid to impress Shintaro. Afterward, while they shared Shintaro's umbrella, she apologized for being too generous, but Shintaro says she's amazing. Shintaro then asks if she wants to go get another umbrella, but Satsumi asks if it's okay to share his. While she waited for Shintaro's response, she blamed herself for being a coward and changed her mind. However, Shintaro says it's okay to share, so they go to get the donuts as planned and eat together. The next day, Shintaro remembers his plans to go out with Isumi whenever they're both off work and finds her waiting for him after school. He waved at her, worried that he might be having a boring evening. However, on their way, Isumi had a lot to say about manga and anime characters. She then asks if he recognizes some anime characters, but Shintaro says he's not really hooked on anime like she is. When Isumi asked what they'd be doing for the evening, Shintaro looked like a fish out of water. While they walked along, they passed by some students who were surprised to find out that Isumi wasn't mute. After a while, Isumi asks Shintaro to wait for her and goes into a store to get some ice cream. When she returns, she presents one to Shintaro. While they enjoyed the ice cream together, Shintaro says it's been a while since he had ice cream, while Isumi said she misses the feel of ice cream on her tongue. Shortly after, Shintaro disposes of his empty bottle and tells Isumi to do the same. However, Isumi seemed pretty attached to the bottle. Afterward, Isumi said she was glad they could spend time together since she's been looking forward to it and didn't get enough sleep because it was her first time going out with a guy. Afterwards, says she also couldn't sleep the night she revealed her secret to him, surprising Shintaro. In response, Shintaro says he had a weird dream about a kappa that night too. Shortly after, Isumi thanked Shintaro as they parted ways and said he'd be buying the ice cream when next they hang out. When she gets home, Isumi undresses and pulls out the ice cream cover she had kept as a reminder of her first time out with Shintaro. On getting home, Shintaro opens his door and finds Tawa and her sister Shui, scantily dressed. The annoyed Shui suddenly branded Shintaro with her palm and called him a cultured moron.
What'd I do?
When Tawa attempts to help Shintaro up, the little wench gets in her way and says she needs to take Tawa back to heaven. Earlier that day, while Tawa folded Shintaro's clothes, she heard a sound on the balcony and decided to check it out. On getting there, she spotted a feather falling and soon found Shui lying face down. Happy to see her sister, Shui hugged Tawa and cried, saying she had a terrible landing. After this, Tawa asked if she was hurt and offered to give her a bath. After she narrates how Shui landed, Tawa asks Shui to introduce herself. After her brief introduction, Shui says goodbye and tells Tawa it's time to go. She then suddenly pulls Tawa towards the balcony where they argue on whether to leave or not. Tawa then gave Shui some milk to calm her rampaging nerves. After this, while Shui enjoys the milk, Shintaro stares at her wondering why she reminded him of Cupid. Afterward, Tawa asks Shui why she came to Earth since it wasn't allowed for angels to do so. Shui then said she got permission from God because she was worried sick about Tawa. Tawa reminds Shui she's only been on Earth for 1 week and asks how she found her way. In response, Shui says she simply followed Tawa's aura and ended up on the balcony. After this, Shui asks Tawa why she chose to live in a trash can, and Tawa tells her she's only squatting with Shintaro. Shui then disdainfully asks about who and what the hell he was. On learning that Shintaro is a man, Shui went off the rails saying all men are cultured animals, while Tawa tried to convince Shui that Shintaro was different. Afterward, Tawa offered Shui some food to calm her down. However, this only drove her crazy since her sister was now a shameless simp who cooks and cleans. Facing Shintaro, Shui loses her cool and demands to know what he's done to Tawa. Just then, Shintaro finds his voice and apologizes for not introducing himself. After introducing himself, Shui insisted he was a cultured fool who messed with her sister's wiring and made her his slave. To make herself feel better, Shui decides she has to put Shintaro 6 feet under. However, Tawa says she made her choices and scolds Shui for speaking like a devil. Afterward, Shui apologizes and says she'll send Shintaro to his maker. Tawa then attempts the milk bribery again, but Shui soon pulls her towards the balcony. However, Tawa refuses, saying she couldn't abandon her mission and that it was dangerous to go outside. In response, Shui asks Tawa how she intends to learn about people if she doesn't go outside. After this, she tells Tawa to think outside Shintaro's little box and follow her back to heaven. Facing Shintaro, Shui asks him how he feels about Tawa living with him. In response, Shintaro says it's been a bumpy ride, but Tawa has been an interesting addition to his otherwise boring life. While Tawa turned red at this comment, Shui cringed at the sight and determined to get Tawa out of there however she could. After this, Shui asks Tawa why she was willing to throw her life away because of a mere mortal. Tawa responds by saying Shintaro gave her a place to stay and makes her happy despite being a stranger. She then said she wanted to stay with Shintaro to make him happy in return. When Shui heard this, she teared up and fled the scene. Shortly after, Tawa and Shintaro went after her but couldn't find her. While they searched for her, Tawa revealed angels feel better when closer to heaven, so they decided to check out the roof. On their way, Tawa apologized for Shui's rude comments, but Shintaro brushes it off, saying he would do the same if in her shoes. When they arrived on the roof, they found Shui sitting alone, so Tawa approached her and apologized for being selfish. Surprised, Shui teared up again and told Tawa she was sorry too. Afterward, they hug each other while Shintaro enjoyed the view. While Shintaro thought Shui had a cute side, Shui gave him the evil side eye, making him change his mind. Suddenly, a pearl on Tawa's chest began to glow, so Shintaro asked if she was about to explode. Tawa then explains that Shui is about to be sent back to heaven. After this, Shui begs God to give her more time and asks Tawa if she really wants to stay. When Tawa says she's not leaving, Shui faces Shintaro and tells him to take care of Tawa if he wants to live long. After this, Shui disappears while Tawa and Shintaro watch. While checking out some plants, Tawa says Shui wasn't totally wrong since she had to go out to learn more about humans. Shintaro agrees and says he's only trying to keep her safe. He then suggests that they go on walks together after dinner to help Tawa get used to it. Tawa liked the idea and thanked Shintaro for being kind. Some days later, during their after-dinner walk, Shintaro explains how the traffic lights help with crossing. However, Tawa misunderstands his explanation. On getting home, while they Netflix and chill, Shintaro thought about letting Tawa learn how to board buses and trains. However, he changed his mind thinking of everything that could go wrong. After this, Tawa made comments about some fruit sandwiches displayed on the TV, so Shintaro said the store was just a train ride away if she wanted to go. Surprised, Tawa asks if the places shown on TV are real. In response, Tawa says the shops and the fruit sandwiches are real. He then asked if she wanted to go get some. Shortly after, they went to the train station where Shintaro showed Tawa how to board a train. After riding on the train for a while, they arrived at their destination. Tawa saw lots of people for the first time and tried running around, but Shintaro stopped her and told her to be careful. After this, Tawa grabs his hands to pull him in the direction of the shops, while Shintaro wonders why his trousers are suddenly wet. When they arrived at the shops, Tawa geeked out over the fruit sandwiches, so they bought some and ate together. Seeing how excited she was, Shintaro felt good about bringing her. Afterward, they explored the city and went for a swan boat ride. During the ride, they came across some old folks who called them a young couple. Tawa then asked what that meant, but Shintaro ignored her question. Later, they spot a dango shop and Tawa tries to grab Shintaro again, but he refuses, saying PDA is not his thing. While Tawa felt embarrassed for overstepping, a woman on a call bumped into her and walked on without apologizing. Shintaro then tries to be the man, however, Tawa says he shouldn't since she wasn't hurt. On their way home, Tawa thanks Shintaro for treating her to a good time. She then says he could have anything he wants for dinner if he just asks.
What do you mean by that?
However, Shintaro missed the hint and suggested they grab some convenience store meals. On getting home, Tawa runs ahead to make some tea while Shintaro follows her behind. On getting to the door, she finds Shintaro's aunt, Mary, sitting and wonders who the homeless chick is. Shintaro joined her and was surprised to see Mary, who suddenly jumped at him. Shortly after, Mary was gobbling up their dinner while the duo watched in amazement. Mary then apologizes for not checking on Shintaro, saying she's been busy with work. Shintaro responds saying she's always been a hermit and should go out more. However, Mary complained of not having enough time. Just then, she choked on her meal and Tawa gave her some water. After this, Shintaro introduces Mary to Tawa and says she owns his apartment. Before he could finish, Mary included that she writes manga for a living while throwing a tantrum. Shintaro then asked if she was drunk, but Mary responded saying she hadn't slept for days. Looking clueless, Tawa asks what a manga is and Mary wonders if she was freshly harvested from a cave. However, Shintaro shows her a manga. Mary then notices the manga is not her work, so she asks why Shintaro doesn't buy her work. In response, he says her work doesn't give him the high he needs. Mary gets pissed and tells Shintaro to forget about her. However, he added that reasonable aunties don't finish their nephew's dinner. After this, she apologizes and says she waited so long for him to return. Shintaro asked why she didn't call, and she explained she had to leave her phone back home because her editor installed a GPS tracker on it. After this, Tawa offers to cook, but Mira suddenly announces that she came with a cake. Shintaro asked what the occasion was, and Mira said it was her birthday, and since nobody wished her, she came to eat the cake with her favorite nephew. Afterward, she flooded the room with her tears while Shintaro consoled her. Shortly after, the in-house celebration began, but Mary couldn't turn off her tear faucets, so Tawa offered her some tissue to wipe off her face. Mira thanks Tawa for being so nice. Just then, she asks Shintaro who she is. While Shintaro tried to cook up a lie, Tawa introduced herself and said Shintaro has helped her in many ways. With a coy smile, Mary asks if the duo were dating and Shintaro says they're just classmates. When she complimented him for being a playboy, Shintaro added that they were planning for a school festival. Facing Tawa, Mary asks if Shintaro is studying in school or clapping the pretty chicks. While Tawa wonders what she meant, Shintaro tells Mary to cut the crap. However, she says she needs to know since she's his guardian. After this, Mary accuses Shintaro of being ungrateful since she changed his diapers and took care of him when he was younger. She then asks Tawa if she would like to see some childhood pictures of Tawa. At this, Shintaro protests, but Mary says he's got nothing to worry about. Later, Tawa leaves to make some tea while Mary and Shintaro talk about her. Mary then asks if Shintaro thinks he's got a chance with Tawa, but he says she's got it all wrong. After this, Mary went to use the bathroom and asked why there were 2 brushes in the bathroom. Shintaro suddenly says he likes to alternate his brushes. While Mary used the bathroom, her imagination ran wild, so she suddenly steps out and tells Shintaro to stay away from drugs and orgies. After a while, Shintaro tells Mary that she's overstayed her welcome. In response, she says Toa's family must be worried about her, so she suggests that they walk home and hit a convenience store afterward. Shintaro reluctantly agreed while Tawa ran into panic mode. On their way, Tawa asks Shintaro what the plan is, so he tells her to fly to the balcony once they part ways. Shortly after, Tawa appreciates Mary for walking with them and runs off. However, Mary stops her and tries to put in a good word for Shintaro. After they part ways, Tawa flies to the balcony as planned, while Shintaro and Mary return to the apartment. Shintaro then tells Mary to leave since it's getting late. However, she refuses, saying she plans to sleep over. Shintaro insists that she leaves, but Mary refuses, saying she'll have to get back to work if she returns home. After an intense moment of chewing out her editor for being the pain in her ass, Mary revealed that her editor was the famous Keita. Shintaro suddenly freaks out, wondering why such a legend would be associated with his failure of an aunt. This made Mary sulk and drown in self-pity. However, Shintaro tried to give her an esteem boost, but Mary was a lost cause. Afterward, Mary concluded she wasn't going home and asked for a blanket. Looking defeated, Shintaro stares at Tawa out the window, and she silently tells him she'll be okay on the balcony. Suddenly, Shintaro heard someone knock and wondered who it was. When he goes to check, Mary tells him not to open up. However, Shintaro opens the door and a Ryuk look-alike walks into the room. She then walks over to Mary and says she can't run forever. Scared to bits, Mary asks Keita how she found her, and Keita responds saying Mary was not as smart as she thinks. Afterward, Shintaro introduced himself as Mary's nephew and thanked Keita for looking after Mary. Keita then apologizes for keeping Mary away from her guardian duties. After this, she promised to let Mary check up on him more often. However, Shintaro says that wouldn't be necessary. After this, Keita wishes Mary a happy birthday and says she's been to her place with some booze and cake to celebrate with her, but panicked when her place was empty. Afterward, Keita and Mary leave to get their mini party started. After this, Shintaro apologizes to Tawa for getting her involved in his family drama. However, Tawa says she enjoyed every bit of it. Sometime later, when Shintaro leaves work, some emo-looking girl bumps into him and asks him to help him evade her pursuers. So Shintaro pulls her and they both escape. Exhausted from the chase, the pursuers stopped and said they were just trying to return her book. Shortly after, while Shintaro tries to catch his breath, he notices Lilishka sniffing him up and suddenly moves away from her. After this, Lilishka says he smelled delicious, and Shintaro says it's because works at a restaurant. He then asks why she was being pursued. In response, the dumb says she has no idea, but she thinks they must be vampire hunters who have tracked her for centuries. Shocked by her claims, Shintaro wondered why every new person he meets either has wings or fangs. During Lilishka's performance, her contact lens fell, so Shintaro realized her eyes weren't really red. However, Lilishka complained of a throbbing eye and took off her eye patch, revealing her other eye. After this, she claims her red eye was proof of her thirst for blood. Shortly after, the other contact lens fell, and she panicked, saying the lenses cost a lot. Shintaro realized that he was on Con Highway and called her bluff. In her defense, Lilishka says she's a real vampire who was just shedding. Then it occurred to Shintaro that he wasn't a demi-human magnet. After this, Shintaro asks if Lilishka would like to go to the police station. However, she says she knows a safe place and asks Shintaro to walk her there. Afterward, Shintaro walks Lilishka to the cafe where she works. She then asks Shintaro to wait inside so she can pay him back for helping her. Shintaro refused her offer and left. Later that day, Shintaro tells Tawa about his encounter with Lilishka. Tawa thought it was cool, but Shintaro disagreed. Shortly after they both went to sleep, Lilishka landed on the balcony. Shintaro wakes up and senses a presence behind him. On looking, he finds Lilishka licking him and screams his lungs out. His noise woke Tawa, who saw Lilishka and assumed she was a visitor. However, Shintaro says she's the girl he told her about. After this, he asks Lilishka how she found him, and she says she followed his scent. Surprised, Shintaro asks Tawa if he stinks, and she says he smells nice. Afterward, Lilishka says she came in from the balcony. Hearing this, Shintaro calls her a trespasser and threatens to call the cops. However, Lilishka refuses to leave unless she gets to lick and sniff Shintaro. At this, Shintaro thinks she is crazy and asks her to leave. However, Tawa thought it was cool to meet a vampire for the first time. Shintaro then tells Tawa that Lilishka was just a clown in an outfit. Suddenly, Lilishka flapped her wings and began to fly. Shintaro then loses his mind, not knowing what to believe. He then asks why she used contact lenses. In response, Lilishka says Japanese vampires don't have red eyes, which she likes. Afterward, she introduces herself to the duo, but Shintaro insists that she get out of his apartment. Lilishka refuses, saying she won't bite him since she's a vampire with boundaries. After this, she says she's trained herself to drink other red fluids instead of blood. Surprised to hear this, Shintaro checks his fridge for some red drink and offers Lilishka some plucked plum instead. Lilishka suddenly jumps on Shintaro, begging to get a nibble. Through the night, Lilishka pesters Shintaro, but he refuses the bite. The next morning when they woke up, Lilishka was nowhere to be found, so they assumed she'd been reduced to ashes by the rays of sunlight. During the day at school, Shintaro worried about Lilishka, wondering if she really burned to ashes or left the apartment. He then decides to go look for her later at the cafe where she works. While this was going on, Satsumi approached Shintaro and said she'd seen more energetic zombies. She then says the upcoming exams must be taking its toll on him. Just then, Shintaro realized he was still a student. Surprised at his reaction, Satsumi tells him the exam is a week away. Meanwhile, Shintaro wonders how Tawa became his life priority. Later during lunch break, on his way to the school store, Shuichi asks Shintaro to get him some pudding. On his way back, Shintaro decides to eat before returning and suddenly gets licked on his cheek. Surprised, he finds Lilishka beside him and asks what the hell she is doing. Afterward, he asks why she's wearing the school uniform and Lilishka reveals she's a student too. After this, she says she only followed his scent and found him, making Shintaro wonder if she's a dog. Shintaro then says he thought she'd been burned by the sun. In response, Lilishka says she's not a night walker but she dislikes the sun. After a while, Shintaro remembers Shuichi was waiting for him and suddenly leaves. When Shintaro meets with his friends, he asks Satsumi if she knows Lilishka. After his description, Satsumi says she's seen her around. However, some other students interjected and said Lilishka was a weirdo who claimed to be a vampire on her first day at school. While they talked about her, Satsumi spotted her peeking at them. After school, Shintaro decides to go home and tell Tawa that Lilishka is fine. However, he gets stopped by Satsumi, who offers to give him her notes to help him prepare for upcoming exams. She then suggested that they go to the library so he could copy the notes. While Satsumi celebrates her courage to ask, a bat suddenly brings a letter inviting Shintaro. He suddenly leaves Satsumi and follows the bat. The bat then leads him to the occult research room, but Shintaro refuses to go in. Suddenly, Lilishka opens the door and invites him in. However, Shintaro tells her to stop sending her familiar around the school. On entering the room, Lilishka makes multiple offers to get Shintaro to be friends with her. However, Shintaro says it's not going to happen. Afterward, she accuses Shintaro of not wanting to be seen with her and says she feels like fate brought them together. She then resorts to sniffing Shintaro by force but gets interrupted by Satsumi and Isumi, who barge in. Surprised to see Lilishka flying, the girls fawned over each other. However, Satsumi sulked for being so ordinary and left out. Afterward, Lilishka apologized for bothering Shintaro and said she was just hooked on his scent. Lilishka then pulls an emotional blackmail card and says she'd like to be friends with Shintaro. Moved by her confession, Shintaro then says she can come over whenever she wants. After this, Isumi said she'd like to come over too. However, Shintaro says he'd like to ask Tawa first. Sometime later, at the Occult Research Club, Shintaro says it's a relief that the exams are over. Isumi and Satsumi then recall when they planned to do a group study for the exams and Lilishka suggested that they use the club room instead of Shintaro's apartment. Afterward, they talked about how using the club room helped their preparations for the exams. Suddenly, Lilishka peeks out of a coffin and appreciates Satsumi for her help during the exams. While she says it's nothing, Shintaro also thanked her, saying he would have failed if not for her help. This made Satsumi blush because Shintaro called her by her first name for the first time. After this, Satsumi points out that their presence might bother the other occult club members. Isumi then suggests that they go somewhere to celebrate the completion of their exams. Shintaro then asks if Lilishka will be joining them. Lilishka then responded by throwing a tantrum and explaining the origin of her name. However, only Isumi seemed to understand her, so Shintaro thought it was a demi-human thing. Afterward, when they prepared to leave, Shintaro asked Lilishka about who the other club members were. She then introduced them to a skeleton in the room who she claimed was another member of the club. While Lilishka says there's one more member, Shintaro opens the door to leave the room, but coincidentally bumps into Hizui, who then falls, exposing her goodies. He then apologized to her, but the crybaby went off like a tornado alarm. Shortly after, Lilishka introduced Hisui as the third member of the occult club, while the others wondered why they both looked tiny. After this, Shintaro introduced himself, but Hisui wasn't in a socializing mood. Lilishka then blames her reaction on her hatred for humans. Hearing this, Satsumi explained to Hisui that they were leaving already, so they walked out. However, Shintaro stops to ask if Lilishka would like to hang out with them. After thinking for a bit, Lilishka decides the club can go to hell, surprising Hisui and the others. However, on their way, Lilishka explained that the previous members of the club had graduated and the club needed new members. She then offered her friends the application sheets, but Shintaro said he wasn't interested. While Isumi and Satsumi wait to hear his response, Lilishka tries to persuade Shintaro of the lame perks of joining the club, but Shintaro refuses and asks Hisui why she joined the club. Hisui suddenly lost her ability to speak, making Shintaro think she hated him. After this, Lilishka explained that Hisui was a bookworm who hated being around people, so she chose to read in the occult club room instead of the library. Afterward, Isumi and Satsumi asked Shintaro where they should go for their celebration. While he thought of an answer, their attention was drawn to a festival going on nearby. As they explore the festival grounds, Arumi and Shintaro reveal it's their first time going to a festival. Satsumi then asked Hisui if she'd been to any festivals. In response, Hisui says she loves summer festivals. Just then, Shintaro realizes Lilishka is missing. However, Lilishka suddenly joins them looking like a circus clown. Shintaro asks what she was up to, and she says it's her way of expressing herself. After this, Lilishka says she could sense from his scent that Shintaro was bothered and asks him to spill. Shintaro then says he's worried that Hisui hates him. After this, Lilishka says it's likely because he saw her panties when she fell. Hisui then responds by saying it's nothing like that, while Shintaro also denies seeing anything. Facing Shintaro, Isumi says it's not a big deal and reminds him of when he saw hers too. Afterward, Satsumi suggests they go get some food, and Isumi suddenly grabs Shintaro and pulls him away. Shortly after they enjoyed some ice cream together, the girls went off to get some buttered potatoes while Shintaro went on a personal exploration. While he explored some cucumber stalls, Hisui showed up and he asked if she wanted cucumbers too. Hisui suddenly gets stunned again, so Shintaro buys 2 cucumbers and gives her one. As he tried to leave, Hisui said he misunderstood her. When Shintaro asks what she means by that, the other girls come along and join them. Shortly after, when they decided to go home, Lilishka stood on the edge of a bridge and muttered some creepy words. After this, she takes a step off the bridge and Shintaro tries to play hero but falls into the river while Lilishka flaps her wings. While the other girls panicked, Hisui dives after him and pulls him out of the water. After this, Lilishka apologized for going crazy while the other girls asked if Shintaro was okay. Afterward, Hisui explains to Shintaro that she finds it hard to talk to boys because it makes her nervous. Hearing this, Shintaro apologizes for the misunderstanding and says he's happy they could square it out. However, afterwards, a halo appeared on Hisui's head and a shell on her back. They then realized she was a kappa. After this, Lilishka says she knew all along but couldn't leak a friend's secret. She then reveals that a kappa turns when they touch water after eating a cucumber. While Shintaro blames himself, Irumi tells Hisui that her secret is safe with the group since they're a group of weirdos. Afterward, Shintaro invited Tawa to meet Hisui. Some other day, Shintaro says he's never seen Tawa mad about anything. When she says she gets mad sometimes, Shintaro responds saying it's okay to yell at him if she ever gets mad for any reason. After this, Shintaro asked why she didn't get angry when a lady bumped into her at the park, and she said it was because it was pointless. This makes Shintaro think it's an angel thing. However, he remembers Shui and changes his mind. While Tawa prepared the food, she decided to give Shintaro a taste of the food by feeding him. However, Shintaro had taken 0 classes on in-house romance, so he took the food and helped himself. Later, when they returned from school, Isumi spotted a newly opened cafe and dragged Shintaro to check it out while Satsumi followed. Shortly after, Tawa passes by the cafe and spots Isumi trying to spoon-feed Shintaro, so she gets pissed. Meanwhile, Shintaro tells Isumi that he's not a baby that needs to be spoon-fed. Afterward, Shintaro goes home with a cake but finds Tawa sulking. He then asked if she was mad, so Tawa responded with a frown face saying she was not mad. When he asks why she looks so red in the face, Tawa changes her mind and decides to eat the cake. While they ate, Shintaro announced he'll be on summer break starting the next day. However, he'll be away, working to keep the paycheck coming. Tawa then says it's okay, since living with him was fun enough. At Isumi's house, while she watched TV, she remembered how she ruined her first effort to make friends and concluded that meeting Shintaro was her greatest achievement. After this, she decides to invite him to see a movie with her the next day. The next day, Isumi showed up at the restaurant and was greeted by her boss, who was surprised to see her. However, she spotted Shintaro and suddenly ignored her boss. To her dismay, the rest of the gang were at the restaurant having drinks together. After the girls explain how they got to the shop, Isumi ignores them and asks if Shintaro would like to see a movie with her. Unfortunately, he turns her down saying he'll be working late. Afterward, the rest of the girls decided to go see the movie together, while Tawa wondered what it meant to go to the movies. Afterward, while they went to the movies, the girls answered Tawa's questions while Isumi sulked. Shortly after they arrived at the movies, they got some popcorn and started the movie. Afterward, while the girls talked about how much they enjoyed the movie, Isumi couldn't stop thinking they ruined her day. Afterward, they decided to watch the movie with Shintaro in the club room. On their way back, while they gave their reviews, Isumi couldn't wait to go see Shintaro. Eventually, Isumi showed some interest in their discussion, and soon she was driving the discussion. After this, the girls thanked Isumi for taking them out to the movies. This made Isumi realize she's been acting weird all day. so she thanks the girls for going to the movies with her when they're not friends. This surprised the other girls and they told her afterward that they were all friends. Isumi then says she thought they were being friendly with her because of Shintaro. After this, Isumi says she has not asked any of them to be her friends. However, Satsumi says it's possible to build friendships without asking. Afterward, they managed to convince Isumi that they were all friends, so she ran away feeling excited. While wondering what it means to be friends with lots of people, Shintaro found Isumi and asked about the others. In response, Isumi says he's just been promoted to the bestie zone, surprising him. Just then, the other girls arrive and Shintaro goes to meet them like nothing just happened. Later that day, Shintaro and Tawa cooled off in the bathtub because the AC was faulty. Tawa then begins to flex her thighs while cooling off. To prevent a battle with his flagpole, Tawa suddenly went outside to get some fresh air. Just then, Lilishka arrives on the balcony, saying she came to take a sniff. However, she almost got knocked out by the stench of his sweat.
Brother, ugh.
Afterward, Lilishka drops an invitation to the occult club's summer camp. However, Shintaro refuses, saying they're not members. After a few minutes of Lilishka's dramatic tantrum, Shintaro agrees to go if the place has a working AC. The next day, Shintaro and Tawa arrive at the venue wondering if they're in the right place. After this, security personnel directed them to a helipad where a helicopter was waiting. Afterward, the helicopter took them to the camp location. When they landed, Hizui welcomed them while they freaked out about flying in a helicopter. Just then, it occurred to them that Hizui was a trust fund kid. Afterward, Hizui led them to a mansion where they were welcomed by her personal maids who introduced themselves. Afterward, the maids gave them a tour of the mansion and they arrived at a pond where the maids told them of a legend about two lovers who died trying to exchange shirikodama. After this, they said it's a belief that any two who profess their love by the pond would be bound forever. When Shintaro asked what the shirikodama meant, the maids blushed and said he could find his between his legs. Afterward, they began the boot camp and Lilishka announced they'd got nothing planned till after dinner. To spend the time, the maids suggested they wrestle, but none of them was interested. After this, one of the maids showed Shintaro how much they love cucumbers in the family. Shortly after, the maids suggested they could swim on a beach nearby and showed them where to get swimsuits. While the girls made their pick, Shintaro realized he needed to leave, so he approached the maids and asked for the male section. Surprised to find out he's a guy, all the maids flooded the room to get a piece of him. Afterward, the maids apologized for not providing him with a swimsuit and were surprised to find out Hizui had a male friend. They then explained that Shui has to stay away from guys to keep the family tradition. This made Shintaro wonder if he was safe. However, Tawa arrived in her swimsuits, which gave Shintaro a few options of where to look. After this, the other girls arrived, while Shintaro struggled to prevent his nose from bleeding. Afterward, Lilishka freaks Shintaro out in her ninja suit. She then tells him vampires don't do well in the beach's sun. Isumi then grabs Shintaro as they run towards the sea and play volleyball. Shortly after, while they feasted on some barbecue, Shintaro offered Hizui some roasted corn and tried to talk to her. However, Hizui runs away before she floods the beach with juices. After this, Shintaro and Tawa played the Hawaii couple while the others built sand castles. Later, the maids announced that they could wash off in the hot spring before dinner and apologized to Shintaro since it was only women's world over there. While Shintaro cleaned up, Lilishka suddenly joined him to show off her swimsuit. While Shintaro wondered what her plan was, Lilishka flew away, giving him a view of her rice cakes. At the hot springs, Isumi says she wishes Shintaro could join them, making the other girls freak out. Shortly after, when the girls compare their assets, Isumi catches Satsumi staring at her oranges and asks if she wants to play with them. In response, Satsumi says she's not into that kind of stuff. While Lilishka tells Hizui that the young shall grow, Isumi gets upset because of Satsumi's response, and it begins to snow. However, the girls calmed her down to avoid snowing in summer. While Shintaro drowned in boredom, the maids suddenly approached him and said they were letting him off the hook since Hizui was having so much fun. However, they showed him what they'd do to his cucumber if it ever got active.
Oh, hell no!
After dinner, they played cards for a bit and went to sleep. However, Shintaro couldn't sleep, so he decided to check out the bath. Shintaro walked to the spring dangling his sausage freely but was shocked to meet Hizui alone in the bath. When he tried to leave, Hizui asked him to stay. After an awkward silence, she thanked him for coming to the camp. She then complimented him on being a ladies' magnet. When Shintaro asks why she attends their school, Hizui says she had an oracle from her shrink who told her to put herself in an environment with men. After this, Hizui says making friends has been the best thing that happened to her. Feeling good, Shintaro returned to his room but got waylaid by the maids who then forced him to wrestle them for breaking his word. After his session with the maids, Shintaro returned to his room wasted. While he tried to relax, Lilishka showed up in his room and said it was time to summon the devil, which surprised Shintaro. Shortly after, everyone was awake and wondering what business they had with the devil. However, Lilishka says it's an important part of the camp. Isumi asks if she knows how it's done, but Lilishka says she's got a manual for it and has tried it once with Hizui, but it didn't work. While Shintaro was relieved he wouldn't be seeing any devil, the other girls thought it was worth the trial. After this, Lilishka explains how it's to be done and says she has no idea what'd show up afterward. Isumi then asks if they won't be shedding any blood to make it work. In response, Lilishka says they'd be sacrificing a virgin foal before chanting. Toa points out that doing that was cruel and Lilishka says they're going to use a hen-shaped cookie instead. Lilishka breaks the cookie and asks them to chant while facing the east. After they chanted, a weird twister appeared and disappeared, leaving Shu behind. After a while, she disappeared. Lilishka then passed out for summoning an angel instead of a devil, while Shintaro asked Toa if she was okay. When asked why Shu disappeared, Lilishka says it's because there was an angel present already. At this, Toa apologized for messing up the summoning. However, Lilishka says it's good to know the summoning works. Afterward, Isumi got hungry for more summoning, which made Lilishka ask if she would join the club. Isumi then said she might if they get to do more fun stuff. While the girls went bananas over the summoning, Shintaro and Satsumi watched unimpressed. Afterward, Isumi suggested that they do something fun like lighting up fireworks. When Toa asks what fireworks are, Isumi explains it to her. After this, Shintaro asked how they intended to get fireworks. Just then, the maids opened up a room full of fireworks. Shortly after, they were lighting up the skies with fireworks. Shintaro then showed Toa how to light up the fireworks. After this, she asks if she's going to blow up, and Shintaro reassures her. When she finally got a hang of it, Toa thought the fireworks were pretty. Afterward, Isumi and Satsumi called Shintaro to light up their fireworks. On getting there, he made a comment about the girlmance going on between the duo. While Shintaro lit their fireworks, Satsumi thought about her relationship with Shintaro. After this, the group of friends had a blast playing with the fireworks. The next day, when they went to see the Tokyo Skytree, Shintaro asked why Toa was so excited, and she said it was because she gets to spend the day with him. When they arrive, Shintaro tells Toa that she gets to watch many TV shows because of the Skytree. Toa then bows to appreciate the Skytree, amusing Toa. Shortly after this, when they went to check out the observatory, Toa said it was similar to other places they'd been to. Shintaro then spots a Japanese native wear and asks if she'd like to try it on. Afterward, Toa asked Shintaro how she looked, and he said she was pretty. While they strolled together, some onlookers complimented Toa, while Shintaro wondered why he suddenly felt proud of himself. Later, they both went to check out the observation gallery but got notified that the gallery was closed for the day. After this, Toa asked if it was going to cost much to check out the gallery, and Shintaro replied saying it doesn't matter. However, Toa's home economics instincts kicked in, and she tried to take off the outfit to get back the money. However, Shintaro tells her not to, since he really wants to make her happy. Shortly after, they took the life to the observatory deck, where they got to see the city in full view. While they enjoyed the view, Shintaro was amazed to find out Toa's got pretty good eyesight. While they explored the deck, they spotted some people scared of heights, and Shintaro explains that it's normal since humans could die from a very high fall. When she heard this, Toa panics, saying Shintaro wasn't safe. However, he says he's sure she'll save him if he falls. After a while, Toa asks why lots of people are carrying heavy bags, and Shintaro explains that many people are arriving to spend the summer break with their families. Toa then asks Shintaro if he misses his family. In response, he says they're all overseas. Shintaro asked Toa if she missed her family in heaven too. Toa then says she would love to see them even though she's not feeling lonely. Afterwards, Toa suggests that they head back since she's beginning to float because of the painful sandals she was wearing. Later, while they explored other parts of the city, Shintaro and Toa got separated in the crowd. After a while, Shintaro finds Toa again and suggests that they hold each other to stay together. They then decided to grab some meals on their way back home. However, Toa says she's had so much fun and she doesn't feel like returning. Shintaro then tells her the summer break was just starting and they had more time to go around. After that, she presented a souvenir to her and she thanked him. To pay him back, she asked Shintaro to follow her. When they got to a secluded area, she asked him to close his eyes. Thinking he was about to get kisses, Shintaro opened his eyes and suddenly found himself many miles above the ground. While Shintaro got a magnificent view of the city, Toa thanked him for taking her in and showing her the world of humans. After this, they decided to head back home. Are you team vampires or team angels? Let us know in the comments section, and if you like anime recaps like this, watch this video here.